For nearly a decade, at least 7 kids the Arizona Department of Child Safety was charged with protecting said they were starved, beaten, burned, pepper sprayed, and pulled from school. We didn't get a single record from DCS, but we got enough from Maricopa police reports, going over hundreds of pages and photos, as well as hours of body camera footage that reveal DCS failed to remove the kids, despite nearly a dozen detailed reports. Now we want some answers for you, the public that funds DCS, for the thousands of other kids still in their care, but most of all, for those 7 children who spent years wondering, will help ever come?
Doesn't let us do anything at all. She doesn't even let us go play outside.
But on a rare trip to the dentist to fix rotting teeth, one of Michelle Hobson's adopted kids confided in an older biological daughter about the alleged abuse behind locked doors.
She starved me for 5 days straight. I threw up one day because of it. She didn't care. She still did not feed me.
The 7 kids, ranging from 2 years old to 13, told police they were routinely beaten.
She used her phone to pound on my head. His stomach is literally covered in bruises. She spits in people's faces.
The kids told police Michelle took pleasure in burning them with a lighter, freezing them in ice baths, and even using pepper spray.
She makes us sit with the pepper spray on us for a whole entire day straight. She emptied 2 bottles on me.
Those canisters eventually found in the mess of the home next to diapers.
If we pee ourselves, she doesn't let us have water for at least a whole entire day straight.
This is as bad of a case without any fatality as I can remember ever reviewing.
Pinal County Attorney Kent Volkmer.
I mean, there was violence perpetuated on the genitals of small children. They were locked in a room. They were deprived of food. And it was all done if they didn't perform these little skits and these little videos.
Those little videos were viewed hundreds of millions of times on Michelle's lucrative YouTube channel, Fantastic Adventures.
She was making, I think the last few months, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month.
The videos were filmed and edited by Michelle's older biological sons. The family even had a green room for special effects and Hobson's torture.
She makes us sleep in a green closet.
How many other people sleep in there?
3 other kids that sleep only in pull-ups. And she has a lock on it, so we can't get out to have to pee.
We go to bed, and the next morning, she won't let us out. Like, we ask her, and she says no.
If she was in a bad mood, Michelle would reportedly remove the light bulbs. And the kids, they'd be locked in the dark, starving in dirty diapers for days.
When trauma happens to a child, it's severe and it's long-lasting.
Robert Pastor is a Valley attorney who specializes in abuse.
Because of what I do, some of the cases I've handled, I'm not surprised.
One room in the house was immaculate, likely for filming. The rest, filthy. While YouTube viewers were oblivious to the horrors off camera, Arizona's Department of Child Safety was not.
It was a collective failure of the system.
While their goal is to protect children, they seem to fail in that effort too frequently.
Just moments ago, we told you about the horrors behind closed doors surrounding the so-called YouTube mom. Millions of viewers and neighbors had no idea it was happening, but DCS did know. Here's Zach Crenshaw with more of his investigation.
Not only did DCS fail to catch the abuse during their monthly visits when Michelle was fostering 14 kids over a decade, some until 2019, but the state agency was alerted over and over about visible signs of neglect and abuse. In this police investigation, detectives detailed the 11 times between 2011 and 2019 that teachers, siblings, even the kids themselves told DCS they needed help. 11 times the kids were left with Michelle. The first documented April 2011. A babysitter told DCS the kids yell and cry after Michelle will lock them in a bedroom. DCS found the details unsubstantiated. 2 years later, May 2013, one child told her teacher, Michelle makes her stand in the corner when she gets home from school until she has to beg. Finding unsubstantiated. A week later, another report from the school outlining 3 years of general neglect. The adopted daughter, with mild intellectual defects, told her inquiring teacher Michelle took her toothbrush, which is why there was gunk all over her teeth and gums. The teacher told the agency Michelle was rarely involved, but had a fear of harm and retaliation due to the report. That fear realized 3 days later, when, after a CPS visit to the home, Michelle contacted the school and withdrew the girl. Records reveal Michelle gloated to the teacher, saying, quote, "The caseworker laughed at the allegation and did not take it seriously." Findings unsubstantiated.
Do you go to school?
Nope. I'm homeschooled, but I don't even do school homework at home or anything.
Back to the DCS reports, and a year later, August 2014, a Gilbert daycare tells DCS Michelle's foster kids are unbathed, covered in feces, and have infected blisters and rashes all over. Despite all the details, the findings, once again, unsubstantiated. 9 months later, April 2015, a foster child says that 2 years ago, Michelle, quote, threw a can of food at her head and it left a scar. Was the scar ever looked at? We don't know, but the findings, you guessed it, unsubstantiated. 3 months later, July 2015, DCS is told that one of Michelle's girls has serious bruising, a horrible rash, and another daughter appears to be starving. Again, nothing was done, unsubstantiated. The most egregious failure, though, happened December 2017. A boy ran from Michelle's Maricopa house naked to avoid another beating. Michelle took a risk and called 911. Officers found the child shivering in a backyard. He begged them not to take him home, saying, "I'm being starved," and pepper sprayed. Officer Michael Takagi documented the kid's disclosures, writing, quote, "She keeps them out of school so officials don't see bruises or hits them in areas that are not visible." Then he called DCS. 6 days later, a DCS worker finally did a welfare check. Reports show she was told ahead of time, quote, "Mother is reported to know CPS and will brief the children and tell them she will hurt them if they say anything." How, after all of those details, Michelle managed to keep the kids is a mystery. But her older biological daughters told officers this in 2019.
Every time it happens, they give her a heads up. Okay. They tell her what's happening because she's a part of the foster care system. They interviewed the kids right in front of her, right in front of my mother.
DCS yet again found that abuse unsubstantiated, and they refused to give us any records, even after Hobson died due to health issues in late 2019.
They want to keep this information under wraps.
In hindsight, there was some mistakes.
Maricopa PD also failed on multiple accounts. Officer Takagi never recategorized the juvenile problem to criminal abuse, so detectives were never flagged to investigate. His lieutenant, Mary Turner, also failed to review the report and catch his mistake. 2 years later, a supervisor would write, "The children were subject to more abuse because of their failures." In fact, Michelle retaliated. The kids told detectives in 2019 that after that runaway incident, Mom got mad. She put us in that room for a really long time. I think it lasted more than a day. So we got scared to tell again, because that was after the cops came once. For all their mistakes, Lieutenant Turner and Officer Takagi were suspended without pay for 10 hours, a single shift.
Does that seem like appropriate punishment to you, given how many more months the kids suffered?
Unfortunately, when we make mistakes as a police, the stakes are high. And we can't make that hurt go away. We have to own that and move on.
They shirked their responsibility, and sadly, these children had to live in this sort of torturous environment for far too long.
I spanked the child, what? No crime in that? No.
It's important to acknowledge the kids told police Hobson was a manipulator.
Ms. Hobson specifically chose children that had significant mental health issues, knowing full well that those with significant mental health issues are going to be less believable.
You're not telling me what was said. No, I'm not going to tell you because there's an investigation.
Michelle would show DCS investigators the stocked fridge and packed pantry, but the kids say they were being starved, still fearful to eat even after officers arrived in 2019.
We're going to protect you. Is there anything in here that you want to eat right now while we're waiting? Seriously, anything. Look, you got some chips.
She's got some breath in her
No, she's not. No, she's not. No, she's not. You are not going to talk to Mom right now.
The children also said Michelle forced them to lie.
Last time CPS and cops came, I wanted to tell them the truth, but they wouldn't let. My mom told me to say all lies, and if I didn't say lies, she would have She threatened me and said she was going to kill me.
Even with those lies, though, Pastor says DCS should have gotten to the truth.
The idea that, oh, children lied and therefore we couldn't have known, well, that's contrary to everything that they're trained to do, which is to look at the totality of the circumstances, and you begin to put it together and you say, hey, there's something going on here. We need to look more closely.
But a closer look never happened.
As a result, we had a number of young children that suffered potentially irreparable harm.
It's harm that will last a lifetime.
The court said this is a person that you can trust, and they were violated so horribly.
Many I've spoken with say Arizona's Department of Child Safety needs massive changes to better protect kids.
Because there weren't adequate resources, they cut corners or they made judgment calls, and as a result, these children got harmed.
We probably report to DCS, I would say, at least 5 times a day. And then you magnify that across the state.
The Arizona legislature, year in and year out, has not given these caseworkers the resources, the training, the payment and salary they need to make sure children are safe.
DCS denied all of my records requests, citing confidentiality, even though Hobson is dead and the children are anonymous.
We deserve to know, why are so many children in the DCS system being hurt?
DCS Director Mike Faust also declined our multiple requests for an interview.
You can't have accountability unless you have transparency. And DCS is an organization that we know one thing. They do not like this type of information finding its way into the public domain.
Do you think any of the kids should live there?
No, I think they're not safe there.
The older sister called this cell phone video a, quote, last-ditch effort to save her siblings.
I want to get them out of there, and I don't want CBS to play their games.
I want all my other sisters and brothers to be in a safe home.
I love you, and I don't even know you.
I love you too, because you're saving me from this house.
I know, baby.
But the larger question remains. Will we ever know how DCS handled this internally?
I hope so. I sincerely hope so, because it's not just these kids, it's all the other kids who are still in DCS care.
It's been 2 years now since Hobson was arrested. 2 years for DCS to reflect on all of those unsubstantiated reports, those missed opportunities to save the children sooner. Not only did the agency deny all of our interview and public records requests, they declined to answer if any changes have been made or any employees held accountable. You can read their full statement, as well as more exclusive details, on our website. Zach Crenshaw, ABC 15, Arizona. This is a beanbag round. The brand many Arizona agencies use is called Super Sock. But as you're about to see, they're far from the soft fabric toy the name may suggest, especially when they're fired out of a 12-gauge shotgun. And a warning, some of the images in this story are graphic. Ricky Sharon was still using crutches 2 months after Mesa police shot him with beanbag rounds.
It's unbearable. Undescribable. I mean, once you see it, you'll understand.
Before we show you that, here's why Mesa police officers encountered Ricky in the first place.
Basically schizoaffective, which is a combination of bipolar disorder and schizophrenic.
Sister Melissa and daughter Shaylin say Ricky has been struggling with this mental illness for years.
He's not even the same person now.
September 13th, just before midnight, Ricky was having an episode. A neighbor called 911 to report him yelling and pacing outside his mom's house. Then she told dispatchers he fired a gun in the air. When officers arrived, one wrote, Ricky walked away from the house with his hands above his head, and the officer no longer saw the firearm. Relatives say the subsequent police commands led to confusion.
Lift your shirt up by the collar. So to him, that was like, lift your shirt up. So he lifted it up from his waistband.
That's when officers say 2 beanbag rounds were deployed onto Richard from approximately 20 feet away. The more accurate phrase, though, might be deployed into, because this is what Ricky's leg looked like in the hospital.
Abrasion burn is what it is. So it means it tears and then it burns it.
His flesh ripped open more than an inch in each direction. In total, 5 beanbags were fired. 3 left craters in Ricky's leg.
It tore the tissue completely off to the point of exposing a, actual tendon that's attached at the calf.
After being hit, Ricky retreated inside his mom's home, which a forensic team later noted was covered in blood. Eventually, he was forced out with tear gas, arrested, then hospitalized for 5 days.
I was pretty sure I was going to lose it. I really didn't think I'd ever walk again.
Ricky isn't the first Arizonan injured by these less lethal beanbag rounds. Like Mesa, DPS and Phoenix police have documented over-penetration with Super Sock.
Drop the knife, bro. You're going to get stun-bagged.
A Phoenix spokesperson confirmed to ABC 15 the department had multiple Super Sock-related injuries inconsistent with historical use. When they did internal and third-party testing, Phoenix says they discovered their rounds were firing at a higher velocity than manufacturer specifications. Now Phoenix, DPS, and Goodyear police tell ABC 15 they're permanently getting rid of all Super Sock beanbags. Since October, I've emailed and called Super Sock's manufacturer, Combined Systems, multiple times. We've requested comment, but haven't heard back. Meanwhile, Mesa PD declined our on-camera interview request. But Assistant Chief Dan Butler told me over the phone, less lethal beanbags have been a very useful tool for a long time. After Ricky was injured, Mesa did velocity testing and determined some of their shotguns were firing Super Sock a little bit faster than manufacturer specs. So Butler sent this memo, changing policy, saying just one type of shotgun is now approved to fire the less lethal rounds. The assistant chief also changed the minimum distance for deployment to no less than 10 yards. That's 30 feet. The old policy was 21 feet. And remember, the officer wrote in his report he shot Ricky from approximately 20 feet away. And finally, the memo states deployments from less than 10 yards, 30 feet, can result in fatal or serious injury.
Yeah, it's an absolute pain.
Ricky's family says his leg is proof of those serious injuries. The grandfather now staring down reconstructive surgery and 2 felonies. Ricky and his family say they want the beanbag rounds gone for good.
I mean, for his leg to look like he straight up got shot with an actual gun, I don't think they should be using them.
Now this story has focused on Super Sock, but there's another beanbag brand that Arizona agencies admit has caused serious injury in the past. In the future, we'll be looking into that and investigating the velocity issues by examining police testing records. I'm investigator Zach Crenshaw, ABC 15, Arizona. Federal agents called it Operation High Country Hydra. In 2019, a tip came in about Flagstaff massage parlors accepting money for sex acts. Homeland Security Investigations and Flagstaff PD launched a joint months-long operation to try and stop the suspected trafficking and prostitution. But when that investigation was complete, not a single trafficking victim had been identified. Arrests were made, though, after 2 officers went undercover unclothed.
And I was like, well, do you want me to take them off? And so she was like, well, your comfort, if you want them off or you don't want oil on them. So there was kind of some confusion on that. So I ended up taking them off. And that's what I felt like the suggestion was from her.
That is Flagstaff officer Dustin Eberhardt in a deposition, talking about the first time he allowed a masseuse to fondle him naked.
As soon as I got aroused, that's when I immediately started asking about the money and like how much. And like I said, I've never done one of these, so I was fairly nervous and I didn't know where to like stop it. So I was trying to stop it quickly.
Officer Eberhardt would do the same thing 7 more times over the next 48 hours. Roughly 3 months later, his coworker, Officer Hutchinson, went back into 5 of those massage parlors and did the same thing, all to see if the businesses would accept debit cards. Attorneys, trafficking experts, even other law enforcement tell ABC 15 there are a lot of issues with what you just heard. For starters, state law says what the officer just admitted to is illegal. 2, experts say it wasn't necessary to make the prostitution case. And 3, in their reports, investigators repeatedly say they're looking into sex trafficking, then proceed to pay for sex acts from potential victims.
Women who work in massage parlors are not a commodity. They're people.
Brad Rideout is an Arizona defense attorney and former prosecutor. He's not involved with this operation.
In Arizona, you cannot exchange money for sex acts while on duty. It is a crime.
State Statute 13-1412. A peace officer commits unlawful sexual conduct by knowingly engaging in sexual contact with any person who's in the officer's custody or the subject of an investigation. Flagstaff Police Chief Dan Musselman says his employees didn't violate state law because the officer did not sexually touch the masseuse. In an emailed response to questions, the chief went on to say, quote, "Quite the opposite happened. The subject fondled Officer Eberhardt, thereby making him the victim of sexual abuse under 13-1404. That officer, who the chief says is the victim, staked out the 8 parlors, walked in with a recording device, paid cash, and took off his boxers. Also, that statute the chief references stipulates abuse only occurs without consent, but Officer Eberhardt says he initiated the process.
So I had just put my hand on the back of her calf and then held it there, and then she laughed about it, and then shortly after that we did the rest of the stuff, and then she had me roll over.
I don't know how you can continue to prosecute a case in which you know that there's a strong possibility that this officer has committed some sort of crime.
Jack Litwack represents one of the 13 people indicted in this operation for conspiracy, money laundering, and operating a house of prostitution. Like many defense attorneys I spoke with, he's shocked Flagstaff Police and HSI used an investigative technique he says has been widely condemned.
They do not need to do that, and frankly, they should have known better.
Chief Musselman, though, said, quote, "It was necessary for there to be direct fondling. But in Arizona, prostitution's defined as engaging in or agreeing or offering to engage in sexual conduct under a fee arrangement." When pressed on that, the chief said it was important offers originate from the masseuse and wrote, quote, "There was an additional concern of potential language barriers."
This is a far overstep into abuse of power and some really disturbing ethical issues.
Jenna Panis is an expert on the topics of human and sex trafficking. She says she was disgusted when she heard about this operation.
You don't ask victims to give you sexual pleasure. That is not appropriate.
In documents, officers and agents repeatedly mention human and sex trafficking as a primary focus of this investigation. Law enforcement even brought along victims' advocates when they made the arrests, writing, quote, "There would be a good likelihood that we would encounter someone who was at the parlor against their will." But in their reports, that stated concern for possible victims only appears after officers Eberhardt and Hutchinson take off their pants, after they're fondled. Before that, investigators never determine are the women we're about to pay to touch city employees trafficking victims.
If you're engaging 8 separate times into trying to have sex with victims, you are engaging in trafficking. So the officers in this case could be charged with trafficking, and they are not.
A prominent Valley doctor hailed as a healthcare hero, but now his companies are in bankruptcy and the Department of Justice is accusing them of unnecessarily admitting patients to the hospital and submitting false billing claims to Medicare.
It's an abuse of the system and it burdens everyone.
ABC 15 investigators at Crenshaw spent weeks talking to experts and looking into this doctor and his companies who the federal government says might owe them $500 million.
Named a healthcare hero finalist by the Phoenix Business Journal in 2021.
Introducing Nima Ghadimi.
Dr. Nima Ghadimi founded Scottsdale Physicians Group, or SPG, as well as SPG Hospice and United Telehealth. Court documents show the doctor and his family's trust owned 100% of all 3 companies. And from the outside, he was doing well. Ghadimi won a contract for SPG to work inside Honor Health's Shea Medical Center. And real estate and court records show Ghadimi owned this $7 million mansion in Newport Coast, California, as well as a $3 million home in Scottsdale.
The information is readily available.
But behind the scenes, Ghadimi's companies were insolvent as early as December 2016, according to the bankruptcy trustee now running the companies. That trustee also says in court filings that in the years that followed, Ghadimi fraudulently transferred millions from the companies to his personal accounts. Right now, there are 18 financial claims filed against SPG. The largest is from the DOJ for $589 million. Most of that $500 million is the result of added penalties and damages, but the feds say they're investigating at least 3 separate schemes involving Ghadimi's companies. The alleged schemes: upcoding Medicare claims, improper inpatient admissions, and wrongful obtainment of PPP loans. A Department of Justice attorney wrote SPG may have submitted more than 15,000 false claims. And their analysis revealed SPG's usage of the highest Medicare billing code was substantially higher than its peer physician groups in Arizona and nationwide.
If that is true, yes, that is a red flag.
That's how they generally hone in on what is a problem.
We asked Valley defense attorney Jim Bellinger and medical billing expert Michael Arrigo to review documents from SPG's bankruptcy. Both have been involved in complex healthcare fraud cases.
I'm sure DOJ is chasing down a lot of data right now.
Was it medically necessary? Was it a mistake?
And then how that was coded and billed to Medicare, Medicaid, or commercial insurance plans.
But it wasn't just coding. The DOJ also says SPG may have been improperly admitting patients to Honor Health Shea in order to increase its physicians' ability to bill federal health care programs for medically unnecessary services. And they may have received illegal kickbacks as a result of those admissions. And Arrigo says that would have impacted more than just our tax dollars, especially during the pandemic.
So there are patients who need that care, who may need that hospital bed. And if someone is in that bed on a fraudulent basis or non-medically necessary basis, resources are being consumed that should go to other patients.
Gadimi also got 5 Paycheck Protection Program loans for his 3 companies, totaling more than $1.5 million. All of that money was forgiven. But the DOJ now says these loans would not have been forgiven had the U.S. been aware the applications contained false information related to the number of employees and that the funds were not used for the stated purpose for which it was intended. The bankruptcy trustee also alleges Gadimi indirectly took monies from government grants and from Medicare for his own benefit, including more than $500,000 in April 2020. And in another court filing, the 3 companies in bankruptcy now say Gadimi should be personally liable as he made all decisions and directed any conduct that formed the basis of the DOJ claim. As for Gadimi, he's no longer running any of the companies. And we tried to reach him at his new Scottsdale home, as well as emailed, called, and texted, but we haven't heard back. Now in a court filing, Gadimi said his companies were solvent until the trustee's scurrilous charges that he says caused the DOJ's unfounded allegations. He also said any money he transferred to personal accounts were wages and for funds invested on behalf of SPG in order to generate profits to repay loans. As for SPG, they're now operating under the direction of that bankruptcy trustee who declined to comment. But just this week, as we were finalizing this story, the trustee shared a new audit with the bankruptcy court. And those findings support the DOJ's claims. In fact, an independent consultant reviewed a sample of SPG's medical records and wrote that if the federal government were to do a full audit, it is probable that more than 90% of payments from Medicare would have to be repaid. The trustee also stated SPG will be losing its contract with Honor Health Shea at the end of June. The hospital system telling us in a statement, Honor Health understands that the government has filed a protective proof of claim in the bankruptcy proceeding. At this stage, these are just assertions, and the government's investigating to see whether its assertions are true. The government has made a request for information. We are fully cooperating with that request. Now, in the coming days, we'll have much more reporting on that new audit and the future of all 3 companies. I'm investigator Zach Crenshaw.